Good morning. Governments in G7 countries are waking up to the problem of severe dependency on China and the other BRICS countries for the key raw materials necessary for modern life. Europe already has deep problems with energy costs because of their dependency on Russia for oil and natural gas, and Europe needs to keep buying it while pretending that they're not. For heavy rare earth metals, their dependency on China is even more critical. It's 100% for the rare earths used in transportation, telecommunications, and nuclear power. 100%. For magnesium, which is used in aerospace and car parts, the EU is reliant on China for 97% of its magnesium sourcing. This table here shows the dependence of the EU on China for these 12 rare earths and their applications. This is a better one. And there is big news for some of the metals here for Europe. Gallium, germanium, graphite, tungsten were recently placed on export bans list from China. So now the EU is hard put to find many of these key raw materials at all. The European Union has just enacted the European Critical Raw Materials Act. They hope to increase and diversify their supply chains for their critical raw materials, increase recycling, and find substitutes for a lot of the metals on this page here. The EU identified 34 critical raw materials and 17 are strategic raw materials. Strategic raw materials are the most important of all for defense and aerospace. We'll link to the report itself, and you can click these buttons and see data for each one. Here are some highlights though. China is 100% of heavy rare earths. The EU depends on Turkey for 98% of its boron. South Africa provides 71% of the EU's plutonium demand. It's when we see maps like this, where we can see the natural resources economies of the world on one interactive page, that we should take the BRICS economic bloc very seriously, because we need them for everything. Putting our mouse on China. China is the C in BRICS. Lots of 100% there. If this were a report card, this kid's average is an A+. A couple more at random. Turkey's in the BRICS now. Antimony, 63%. And Turkey is really in a strong position for antimony, given China's export bans on the antimony. It'll be interesting to see how antimony plays out for Turkey. Boron, 99%. South Africa is where Europe gets 41% of their manganese. Brazil is niobium, 92%. The EU is well motivated to stay on Guinea's good side. 63% of their aluminum is coming from there. Now the EU is playing catch up. This illustration is a little bit busy. Sorry, but it's good. The EU is in gray, the US is in blue, China's in red. The EU, the United States, and China each have their respective lists of critical materials. And we can see the overlaps where the three blocks have identified the most critical natural resources: aluminum, antimony, cobalt, copper, fluorspar, graphite, lithium, nickel, rare earths, and tungsten. And there at the upper right, we see that China has near monopolies in the processing and refining of those. 100% of natural graphite, 70% of cobalt, 60% of lithium, 40% of copper. Manganese, China's at over 90%. But China has so much manganese, it's not on their critical materials reports. But manganese is on both the EU's and the US critical lists. And there are other materials that this is true of. Germanium, magnesium, niobium, platinum, titanium, and a few others are in critically short supply in the US and Europe, but not here in China. The US table here needs updating. Gallium and silicon are on the EU list, but don't show up on the US table, but they were added recently. Last year, then, the European Union approved an ambitious new plan to move the other direction. Their hope is that the annual consumption of raw materials would be 10% from local mines, 40% from EU processors, and 25% from recycled materials. They're speeding up the permitting process and is now at a maximum of 2 years, 2 months for miners. That doesn't sound very fast, but it's Europe. Recycling and processing within 15 months, but with exceptions carved out for local communities to drag everything out on the environmental impact side of things. And large firms need to identify vulnerabilities in their supply chains. None of this is going to move the needle very much. It's commonly known where the rare earth metals are in Europe. They've got a lot, but this speed up permitting process comes after surveying, which takes months. And the biggest problem for European raw materials producers is that everything just costs too much. European electricity and energy are the most expensive in the world. Roads need to be built, which is more permits from other different agencies. Water sources need to be secured. Labor costs are high. And after miners and refiners get over all those hurdles, companies in BRICS countries can just reduce prices to the point where producers in Europe or North America can't sell above their cost of production. This act doesn't do anything to change those facts on the ground. This is from 2023 and involves a massive discovery of rare earths in Sweden. It will take several years to survey the deposit and investigate if it can be done at all, let alone profitably. The challenges are humbling. It will take at least 10 to 15 years before they can begin mining and bringing materials to market. This is from their CEO, and he's telling us not to get our hopes up. And that's at least a decade to get raw materials. Then comes separating and refining and turning them into magnets, and China has monopolies on those industries. Experts say nothing significant is going to change until 2050. The Swedish discovery is important, but the global supply chain dependence on China isn't going away. This is Suzhou, Jiangsu province. Be good.
Everyone who hears these words of Jesus and acts on them is like a wise man who built his house on a rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and yet the house did not fall, for it was founded on a rock. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.